David Soul really hated him more than anyone. David Soul was born David Richard Solberg on August 28, 1943 in Chicago, Illinois. He was more than just a Hollywood actor. He was a person with many talents whose work went by on television, film, and music. His dad was a Lutheran minister and his mom was teacher. Soul spent a lot of his child moving between the United States and South America, especially Argentina, where his father worked as a religious advisor and teacher. This life in different countries gave young David a strong sense of curiosity about people and cultures and gave him a social awareness that later shaped both his artistic career and his view of the world. Long before his fame, he was simply a boy who loved storytelling, performance, and the power of music to connect hearts across borders. David Soul's career started out small in the 1960s when he first showed up on American Levison variety shows as the Covered Man, a mysterious singer who performed with his face hidden by a mask. The trick got audiences and producers interested, helping him get the attention of Hollywood. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, he began getting small but memorable television roles on shows such as Flipper, I Dream of Jeannie, and Star Trek. However, it was his role as Detective Kenneth Hutch Hutchinson in 1972's television hit Starsky and Hutch that made him a worldwide star. The buddy cop drama, which aired from 1975 to 1979, paired Soul with Paul Michael Glaser and became a huge how of the decade. Mixing tough crime stories with emotional depth and human feelings, Soul's acting as Hutch, gentle, thoughtful, yet fiercely loyal, set him apart from other TV heroes of the time and made him one of television's most beloved leading men. Along with his acting career, David Soul was also a talented musician and singer-songwriter. His smooth voice and heartfelt lyrics won over millions when he released a bunch of hit singles in the late 1970s. Most notably Don't Give Up on Us, which hit #1 on the charts in both the United States and the United Kingdom. His other songs include Ding Silver Lady and Going In With My Eyes Open, showed a softer romantic side that connected deeply with his fans. For a while, Soul successfully did both acting and music, becoming one of the few stars of his time to achieve fame in two artistic arenas at the same time. His musical career earned him a loyal following in Europe, especially in Britain, where he would later spend much of his life and career away from the spotlight. Soul's life was one of deep thinking, change, and strength. He went through personal struggles, including failed marriages and battles with addiction, but he never allowed these hard times to define him. Instead, they made his humanity deeper and inspired him to fight for compassion and social justice. In later years, he became a British citizen and an outspoken supporter of causes such as workers' rights, prison reform, and environmental protection. His move to London also marked a return to his theater roots as he performed in stage productions like Death Trap and Jerry Springer the Opera, reminding audiences of his incredible ability as a performer. David Soul was not a man happy to live off past glories. He constantly looked for new challenges and creative outlets, even directing and producing in his later years. His later life was marked by courage in the face of getting sicker. A heavy smoker for decades, Soul faced severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and cancer, which led to the removal of one of his lungs. Despite his health problems, he continued to appear in public when possible, often thinking back on his life and career with honesty and gratitude. When asked about his legacy, he said that he wanted to be remembered not just as Hutch or a Papa doll, but as a man who cared deeply about people and the world around him. His humility and honesty earned him respect from both fans and peers alike. David Soul's romantic life was as colorful and many-sided as his career, marked by a series of marriages that showed both his passionate nature and the challenges of balancing fame with personal stability. Over the years, he married 5 times, each relationship leaving a lasting mark on his journey through life, love, and self-discovery. His first marriage was to Miriam Russeth in 1964 when he was still a young man trying to find his place in the world. At that time, Soul was just beginning to explore his creative talents, caught between his love for music and his growing interest in acting. The marriage was brief, lasting only about a year before ending in divorce in 1965, but it gave him his first taste of both love and loss as an adult. It also happened during a period of uncertainty in his life. He had not yet found his calling or his voice as an artist. In interviews, Seoul would later think back on how his youthful quick decisions and restlessness often hurt his early relationships, and this first marriage was no exception. His second marriage came a few years later to actress Karen Carlson, whom he married in 1968 at the time. Both were young actors trying to make it in the entertainment industry, and they shared a creative and emotional connection. Karen Carlson would later become known for her roles in films such as The Candidate and television series like Dallas and In Theat of the Night. The couple had one son together, and their marriage lasted nearly 10 years before they divorced in 1977. This was perhaps one of the most important relationships of Seoul's life as it covered the years when his career began to take off. During this marriage, he rose to stardom through his role as Detective Kenneth Hutchinson in Starsky and Hutch, which turned him into an international celebrity. The pressures of fame, however, and the constant demands of Hollywood life took a toll on their relationship. Despite their deep affection for each other, their marriage eventually fell apart due to the strains of public life and personal differences. In 1980, Seoul married Patty Carnell Sherman, who had previously been married to Bobby Sherman, the singer and teen idol of the 1960s, and 1970s. The marriage got a lot of media attention because both David Seoul and Bobby Sherman were heartthrobs of the time. Patty and David's marriage was passionate but stormy, characterized by both love and conflict. They had one child together, but their relationship eventually fell apart, leading to divorce in 1986. During this time, Seoul faced personal challenges, including struggles with alcohol and emotional pain. His intense personality and the pressures of his fame made keeping a steady family life difficult. In later years, he expressed regret over the pain caused by his personal struggles during this time, admitting that he was still learning how to balance his inner demons with his desire for stability and connection. Seoul's fourth marriage to actress Julia Nickson took place in 1987, marking another chapter of love between two creative spirits. Julia Nickson was known for her roles in films such as Rambo, First Blood Part 2, and China Cry. The pair shared a mutual respect for each other's artistry and intellect, and their relationship was marked by a deep emotional connection. They welcomed a daughter, China Seoul, who would go on to become a talented singer-songwriter in her own right, inheriting her father's musical ability. However, despite the affection that bonded them, their marriage ended in 1993. Their separation was friendly, and they remained connected through their daughter and shared creative interests. After several years of personal thinking and growth, David Seoul found lasting love with Helen Snell, whom he married in 2010. By this point, Seoul had weathered many storms, both professionally and personally, and had gained a deep sense of peace and gratitude. He met Helen while performing in a stage production in the United Kingdom, where he had moved and met at his home in later life. Helen, who worked in public relations for the British Parliament, offered him a calm and supportive partnership that was very different from his earlier, more stormy relationships. Their marriage represented a period of peace and stability for Seoul. In interviews, he often spoke lovingly of Helen, crediting her with grounding him and providing the emotional support he needed in his later years. For decades, fans of the classic 1970 seconds television series Starsky and Hutch believed that its two leads, David Seoul and Paul Michael Glaser, shared a deep off-screen friendship that matched the unbreakable bond of their on-screen characters as detectives Hutch and Starsky. The duo amazed audiences with their chemistry, natural friendship, and easy banter. But behind the cameras, things were not nearly as warm as they seemed. In truth, David Seoul had a deep and growing anger toward his co-star Paul Michael Glaser, one that would follow both men long after the show's end. Seoul later admitted, "People thought we were best friends. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. There were days I could hardly stand to be around him." When Starsky and Hutch premiered in 1975, Seoul and Glaser were both rising stars with something to prove. The show's immediate success thrust them into the spotlight as television's coolest cricketing duo, and fans fell in love with their energy and brotherly bond. But behind the scenes, competition grew. "Paul and I had very different ways of working," Seoul once said. "I like to dig deep into the character to understand his emotional core. Paul was more practical. He just wanted to get the job done." The tension between their acting styles often led to fights during filming, especially when both men fought for creative control over their scenes. As the show went on, those differences hardened into personal hatred. One of the main sources of conflict came from Paul Michael Glaser's growing unhappiness with show. Glaser, frustrated by what he saw as predictable scripts and repetitive storyline, began saying he wanted to leave the series. Soul, however, saw this as being ungrateful toward a project that had given them both fame and fortune. "I couldn't believe he wanted out," Soul recalled. "We had millions of fans who adored us and he just seemed to treat it like a burden. I thought that was incredibly disrespectful." The more Glaser complained, the more irritated Soul became and their working relationship grew tense. Crew members recalled moments when the two refused to speak between takes, keeping a cold professional attitude only when cameras were rolling. Their personalities, too, were complete opposites. Soul, with his thoughtful and sensitive nature, often approached situations with emotion and idealism. Glaser, confident and opinionated, had a bluntness that could come off as arrogance. Paul had a way of talking down to people. Soul later admitted he'd challenge directors, argue with producers, and even tell me how to deliver my lines. After a while, it got exhausting. He always wanted to be right. This constant power struggle made filming difficult and further damaged any chance of genuine friendship. Soul, feeling overshadowed by Glaser's assertives, began to distance himself emotionally. It wasn't hatred in the beginning, Soul confessed. But as time went on, the tension turned into something darker. Even after Starsky and Hutch ended in 1979, the bitterness stayed. While both men tried to move on to new projects, journalists and fans constantly linked their names together, asking about their brotherhood from the show. Soul grew frustrated by the false story. "People would stop me on the street and ask how Paul was doing," he once said. "I'd smile and say, 'He's fine.' But inside I was thinking, 'I don't care how he's doing.'" Over time, the conflict became something of a Hollywood legend, the hidden feud behind one of television's most beloved partnerships. Years later, as both actors got older and faced life's hardships, the bitterness softened. Soul went through personal struggles with addiction and health, while Glaser faced terrible loss with death of his wife and the illness of his children. In his later years, Soul thought back on their complicated relations with a mix of regret and understanding. "I think we both had egos that got in the way," he admitted. "If I could go back, I'd handle things differently, but at the time it felt like a war, and he wasn't about to surrender." Despite their differences, the bond created through Starsky and Hutch could never truly be erased. When asked late in life whether he still hated Glaser, Soul laughed softly and said, "I don't hate him anymore. You can't hate so me and who shared that kind of history with you. But he sure made it hard to love him." Their story stands as a reminder that even the closest partnerships on screen can hide deep divisions behind the scenes. For David Soul, the tension with Paul Michael Glaser was one of the most defining and painful chapters of his career. Though the world remembers Starsky and Hutch as a symbol of friendship, Soul's truth was far more complex. Beneath the smiles and friendship, there was a storm that never truly cleared. Soul was a 3-pack-a-day cigarette smoker for 50 years. Although he stopped smoking 10 years before his death, he was seriously affected by progressive lung disease and also had a lung removed due to cancer. Soul died in London on January 4, 2024 at age